whānau. Mental note to self, never follow Sherry after a kōrero. And if you've ever had a beer with her, she gets a little bit more energetic. And don't ever have chocolate biscuits at a meeting. Ko te aroa mai te whanau puni oku iwi, ko Eric Williams ahau. Engari, I was born in Taitokero and brought up in a place called Mūrewa, which is also known as Tuna Town, which has got a lot to do with the journey that I've been on and why I'm in front of you right here today. Since 1995, I've been working at a place called NIWA in a team called Te Kaihao Taihora Nukurangi, which I'm going to just talk to you a little bit about. Then I'm going to take the opportunity from my perspective at NIWA and talking about some of the shifts that I've seen in the last 5 to 10 years about what's happening in our space, because I think there is a lot of things going on that Māori whānau hapu can harness and influence and make the most of. And then I'm also really going to touch on 3 examples really quickly and then kind of finish off with what is our pathway forward and hopefully inform some of the conversation that we're going to have āpopo. So Te Koha is a group within NIWA, was established around 2001 by a lady called Dr. Charlotte Severn. It's a team of Māori scientists, managers, technicians. We currently have 14 staff members. It's a really positive time for building capacity of young Māori scientists and providing with a pathway in organisations like NIWA. I know that's not the be-all and end-all, but organisations like NIWA and Landcare have a lot of expertise and knowledge that Māori need to access, whether that's through non-Māori individuals or the resources or institutional knowledge that we have. So my philosophy is to infiltrate and make sure that some of that information is getting out and empowering our communities and kind of addressing some of the imbalance in terms of the access to information and those sorts of things. So we've been really fortunate that NIWA had the vision to set up that team. We've been growing, we have peaks and troughs like anything else, but our primary job is to deliver research of benefit to Māori, so to influence every single opportunity that we can influence that comes into an organisation like NIWA and see if we can't make sure that it's addressing a Māori research need. We're not always successful and we're learning all the time, but I'll talk to you a little bit more about the research context that's happening now, and I think there's more and more opportunity to influence what organisations like NIWA and organisations around the motu are doing in terms of research on taonga species and also research that is a benefit to Māori communities in general. So that's just a little photo of our team, -3, just so you can see them there. We're just really holding the space for the next generation, to be honest. They're going to be a lot more talented, a lot more onto it. So some of the shifts that are happening at the moment that I've seen is that the way that MB, Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment, are distributing funding for large projects. So we don't want 20k here and there, whānau. We want bigger pots of money so we can do something substantial that meets the size of the catchments and the issues that we're trying to address, and also builds capacity over the long term. So we don't want little pieces of money where you're building capacity of your rangatahi and then there's no more pūtea, and then where do those rangatahi go next? So I'm kind of highlighting MB as that's one of the only places where we can get substantial amounts of money. So at the moment that MB is putting that money through things called the National Science Challenges. There are 12 of them. 3 of them could be adapted to do and deliver taonga species research. Only 1 of them is. So again, we need to influence the other ones that are happening in that space. And also a thing called the Endeavour Fund. So that it used to be in the freshwater space that funding would only come on stream or become available every 6 years in a freshwater context. The Endeavour Fund is a total shift in terms of the funding system, and that will be an annual thing with no specific kaupapa. So we don't have to gear ourselves up for a 6-year kind of time frame. We can gear ourselves up every year to have a go at accessing that kind of funding. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because that's a huge shift in terms of accessing pūtea with an organisation like MB. Also, MB makes sure that all those proposal writers, they have to address a policy document called Vision Mātauranga. If they don't think that their kaupapa applies to Māori, they have to say specifically why that doesn't. And sometimes that's quite challenging, be like a bit of a wanker if you couldn't put an environmental kaupapa with a Māori research priority in there. So that is, again, something that we can influence in terms of what those kinds of organisations are writing in that space. But to be honest, although a lot of our job is about raising capacity within NIWA amongst non-Māori about what those research priorities are, heaps of non-Māori scientists don't know how to do that. So I'm just putting that word out to you that these people out there that they want to know how to do that and they want to work with you way beyond consultation and liaison. Those words are out the door. This is about engagement, setting and leading it with partnerships. So I'm just saying that that's a potential opportunity, a shift that's happening and a potential opportunity. Another shift that's happening, and many of you will know all this stuff already, is that several Crown agencies have been developing science plans and strategic plans at a very high level. And they all mention mātauranga Māori, te ao Māori, mahinga kai, Māori perspective. I assume that when they are mentioning these kinds of objectives and tasks in their strategic plans, that they also are putting resourcing aside to make that happen. So it remains to be seen how that resourcing will come out to you guys, but only Māori can deliver on all of those things that are written there. So again, those are things that they've said they want to do. I assume resourcing is coming along with that, and only you guys can deliver on what they're saying that they need. Ka pai. Another shift that I've seen in the last 10, 15 years was this old school focus on salmon and trout. I'm really not a big fan of salmon and trout. They have taken way too much pūtea away from us over time, and actually also stifled the development of science capacity and also the capacity we need to manage our taonga species moving forward, because that's taken up all the money until recent times. So a huge amount of money has gone into the understanding the ecology and pressures on these recreational fishes that people will go in there and do for their holidays. Meanwhile, we know bloody bugger all about our own taonga species. We know very little about their life cycle. We know very little about what those pressures are actually doing in terms of their impacts and actually how to measure that. We don't even know about the state of some of our taonga species. We don't even know their distribution. Kaki is a classic example. So it's really Māori that have driven this shift or this change and this focus in terms of what we research into kaura, kāki, piharo, kanakana, and tuna. And so some of the things that you think that these guys back in the behind the scenes have been working on for a very long time actually hasn't been happening. So this new context and this new Māori-driven co-management context is going to shift how we manage and what we know about our taonga species. But this new context, the traditional science approaches and the way we usually will do that, the way people have done that work in the past is too old school. We need something new, we need something more sophisticated, we need something more innovative. So don't freak out, I'm not going to go through all this sort of stuff. But just over the years, this is kind of how I put the pieces of the puzzle together in my head to make sense of it. And based on a lot of the mentors that I've had, which heaps of them are in the room today, and also all the questions and inquiries we get from whānau around the country. So I want to manage my taonga species, and we need a variety of information and tools. We need a variety of skills and expertise, including social scientists, policies and planning, lawyers. There's a lot more complexity in terms of what we need as Māori to successfully manage our taonga species to meet our customary, cultural, social and economic needs. So really I'm just right from the top, from helping whānau to articulate their values for a specific freshwater management decision-making process, to the bottom where you're evaluating the success or otherwise of a variety of actions or a course of action that you've taken. There's heaps of mahi to be done in that space. There is no fit-for-purpose approach for any of those steps, and unlike Western science, which can go and pick off a methodology off the shelf, if you like, so measuring E. coli, that's a well-established methodology. It had international and national capacity jammed into developing that methodology. We need the same courtesy to take the time to develop approaches around all of those things in the way that we need to make it happen. So just very briefly, I'm going to just touch on some of the approaches You couldn't see all that, sorry, but there was a few key kind of headings in there. I'm just going to touch on 3 examples with projects that I've been involved in around developing approaches, the how to do. And really I'm complimenting all of the speakers before me because they've all talked about a lot of the other things that I'm not going to touch on there. But the first one is how can we help whānau communicate values, practices and opportunities? A lot of times that's site-specific or has a massive catchment scale. How do we bring kōrero from different hapu and marae communities together? Social science can help that conversation. And so an example of that is Maniapoto Māori Trust Board, and they had a project called the Maniapoto o Whānau Priorities for the Restoration of the Waipa River. And so they drew on social science methodologies, a methodology developed by Gail Tipper to collate, but also help group and prioritise different kōrero around different themes. In regards to tuna, whānau, and you guys all know this already, sorry, so it's not rocket science, but it kind of goes back to one of the agencies saying, Mātauranga Māori to talk about the state and change and pressures on. We're already doing this sort of stuff. It's already being done. So in regards to tuna, Maniapoto whānau, of course, can talk about the changes of state, how it's changed, what whānau or populations can no longer support them to do. They know what is happening in their rohe specifically to cause that change, and they can set the outcomes and the targets that they are seeking as part of restoring that tuna population. Whānau can do all of that, but sometimes social science or those tools help to kind of collate that and package it up in this context for Maniapoto to then talk to Waikato Regional Council first and foremost. So, for example, there's a lot of kōrero about tuna. It's been crunched down in this particular place where whānau suggested a course of action, and then Waikato Regional Council then had to respond to that in the Waipa Catchment Plan. So these are just 2 examples of actions that whānau suggested, and then on the other side how Waikato Regional Council responded to that in the Catchment Plan, which is now set in place and all stakeholders in the catchment have to come to have a look at before they progress with an activity. But of course that's not the only tool that Maniapoto are using. They also have developed their iwi environmental management plan and their fisheries plan. And then there's a package of work in terms of what Maniapoto priorities are for the restoration of the Waipa River and their taonga species. They direct all of those interested parties to those documents first and foremost before they come to them. So it also kind of weeds out the people that are really committed to that kaupapa, if you like. And my second example, just about multiple knowledge systems and bringing knowledge systems together. Jane and I are working on a project called Ngā Kete o Te Wānanga, and the 4 Murihuku Runanga have come together to decide what their priorities are moving forward in this freshwater management space. And one of the things that is testing their time and how to do it is how to get cultural values or mahinga kai values into the national objectives framework, which Donna touched on earlier today. But one of their issues is that, first and foremost, a lot of the younger generations have been, or over generations, whānau have been locked out of huge areas of their rohe due to the national parks that are in the upper Whakatipu catchment. And so they have to take a slightly different approach in terms of reconstructing their mātauranga Māori based on historical knowledge sources, cultural value mapping, even using missionary and early explorer diaries, taking the pieces of information out of that they can, to kind of reconstruct how their whānau used the Te Koraka Pounamu Trail in the old days and what values were supported as they made that journey from the Waio up into Whakatipu to process Pounamu. So that project is ongoing. We've got 3 more years to go. But it is a way of bringing knowledge systems together, and then we're developing a kind of methodology around how do we measure the state or pressures on those values at those different sites. It's also got an added complication in terms of the current freshwater management context, where the mātauranga that was generated, that was associated with the Te Koraka Pounamu Trail, It doesn't really fit in nicely with the current way that the catchments are managed. It covers at least three catchments. It covers 20 different agencies, have to come in at some stage, so it's a lot of complexity, but that is what murihuku whānau need in that context, so we have to give that a go. The last one I'm going to just touch on is ways of communicating and evaluating success or otherwise of a restoration program, or where your Taonga species management is going. And an example of that is the Waikato River report card. Report cards internationally are getting a little bit more traction, if you like, as ways to engage a really wide public audience about how things are going. When you're spending millions and millions of dollars to restore a catchment, you kind of need to report back to people about how that mahi is going. The Waikato River report card was an international first in terms of most report cards will measure the state of the environment based on biophysical measures like water quality. If you've got species information. But this was a total about face, or in terms of needed to build or strengthen those approaches in terms of when we say that we are measuring it against the vision strategy for the health and well-being of the Waikato River. That means that we also bring whānau and whānau priorities for the restoration of the river into the picture. And therefore, biophysical data sets don't really cut the mustard in terms of the complexity of communicating the success or otherwise of that. And so tuna are a part of that. They're one of, I think, about 120 indicators within that quite complex report card. But, the Waikato River is one of our most heavily used catchments, but it's also one of our most heavily researched catchments. And even to kind of grade how tuna populations are doing in that catchment was incredibly difficult, and we still had to have a fallback position of best professional judgment. Nothing about that process is great at the moment, but it lays the foundation for the next group of people that work on that report card or that way of communicating success or otherwise to do a better job or to build on there. But also it directs where we need more information to be coming up from whānau. And only whānau and marae communities can provide that information coming up into the report card. So just in a nutshell, we all know that securing long-term funding to fill Taonga species research and monitoring gaps is challenging, but does the Vision Mātauranga policy in a way to influence funding opportunities every year, in addition to what Don is saying about direct iwi funding, the more the merrier, the more things that we can influence and get working towards benefits for us and our Taonga species, the better. As you've already heard, heaps of people are already doing some amazing mahi around the motu. But, considering that agencies do have these high-level objectives and tasks, is that capacity building really being acknowledged and supported by agencies moving forward? And I just also want to, as you know, the Māori research needs and management needs for tuna across disciplines. We need a lot more than our usual kind of science siloed approach. They cross agencies, which is really a complex network to deal with. I mean, in Murihuku, some of the you could be meeting all day, every day with all these bloody agencies just to, but actually not even doing anything, because it is really, really quite complex. And they're not often talking to each other, although I know that Te Waimari is coordinating more conversations across agencies, so it is a little bit better use of everyone's time in terms of coming together to have those conversations. And it also crosses scales. I mean, tuna ki atu ki tai out into the Pacific goes back to Matua Ken's kōrero about when do we engage our Pacific Island nations into this conversation about really managing our species at the scale that is really required. We're actually only doing a little patch-up job at the moment, but we need to think big and think long-term. And then even if we can't do that with the people in the room, we need to actually plan for that for the next generation to then step into that space. So, just to finish, I'm a scientist, and they say scientists shouldn't be biased, but that's my job to be biased. I'm here to represent the Māori research priorities within the Pākehā organisation, and to my mind, only Māori can deliver on a lot of the research needs and strategic needs that are being expressed by themselves and agencies at this time. So just maybe this will help us lead into our conversation, our pōpō, about some of the things that are happening and some of the things we need to shift and change into the future. Kia ora.